So before the season started of 2024, a lot of experts and fans in general really predicted that not only would the Carlton Football Club be a team that looked like they were going to be contending for the whole entire year, but they would be a team that, in most people's grand final predictions, would not only make it, but could even win the 2024 Premiership. Of course, this didn't end up happening, and the Blues not only fell short, but to a lot of people, they kind of disappointed and didn't really meet expectations. Again, considering the year before they literally were able to make a prelim, it did really seem that the next step would not only be a grand final, but for a lot of Blues fans would hopefully be a premiership win. But unfortunately for them, with a lot of different injuries and I think just an overall game style and system that was pretty easy for a lot of teams to actually coach against, the Blues ended up finishing 8th, of course, winning 13 games and losing 10 games. Again, the injuries were a lot, but as mentioned earlier, a lot of teams seem to find it pretty easy to actually not only play against the Blues, but coach against the Blues, as one criticism that a lot of experts had throughout the season was their midfield was really one-dimensional, and there wasn't a whole load of dynamic in the midfield compared to a lot of different teams out there in the AFL. Again, what people mean by this is when you look at a lot of teams like Port Adelaide, they would have a whole lot of different players in that midfield. You would have the absolute inside and out contested beasts like Ollie Wines, a guy like Zach Butters who could play a little bit more on the outside as well. Again, Connor Rozee, who could not only play in that inside but move around multiple positions. You'd have Jason Horne-Francis, the big-bodied, tall inside midfielder as well that could push up forward and almost play as like a third tall. You had teams like that who had so much different rotation and flexibility in their midfield. And then you unfortunately had Carlton, who really had a lot of players who kind of played pretty similar and had that similar mold, like those really big inside contested midfielders who relied on the contested possession and clearance work in players such as Patrick Cripps, Matthew Kennedy, etc, etc. Again, for the most part, I think they were missing that flexibility and were really kind of looking for a playmaker, but also another midfielder who could rotate and move all around the ground. Again, Patrick Cripps was, for a lot of the time, the player that they would mostly send forward, and even he was rarely used down there. Matt Kennedy and Sam Walsh would mainly just reside in the inside as well. George Hewitt was in there too, and you could tell they were screaming out for those playmakers like an Adam Chera, who really just unfortunately missed out with injury. Again, Adam Chera was only able to play 13 games for the Blues, and you could tell they were really calling for a playmaker and a really good ball user to come into their team, which Chera has been known to do. Again, this year he was only able to average 19 disposals on 73 disposal efficiency, while in the previous year he averaged 25 disposals per game, an extra 6, and a disposal efficiency of 75%. Again, when they needed a ball user, he was a guy who was really able to come in and play that role. In saying all of this and talking about how Carlton's inside midfield looked really similar with players like Cripps, Hewitt, Sam Walsh, and of course Matt Kennedy, it was very obvious that the Blues needed to change, and luckily enough, I think they actually really listened to the criticism that a ton of people had and decided to do a couple of things. First of all, they made it very well known that they were going to be looking to put Matthew Kennedy up for trade. Again, not that Kennedy's a bad player or anything like that, but his play style is just way too much like Patrick Cripps, and they didn't exactly need that anymore at all. So they put him up for trade, and a team like, the Western Bulldogs were actually able to come in and offer up a trade that the Blues liked. So that was kind of step one that they did, which I think will really help them next season. So with moving on Matthew Kennedy, they obviously needed to replace him, but again, not replace him with another big inside contested player, but a player who can come in and hopefully help out with the ball use in this team, be a really nice two-way runner who will add some speed to this midfield as well. And that's exactly what they did with them trading up to pick number 3 and bringing in Jagger Smith, who is not only a massive ball winner, but also is a really good clearance player who's extremely quick and can really use the ball, which will just add so much flexibility into that midfield. Again, there's been some rumors over the off-season as well that players like Elijah Hollins and Ollie Hollins, obviously the brothers, could be actually moving to play a lot more inside midfielder to add some more rotations throughout the team. Again, as we know, Ollie Hollins actually spent most of his time on the wing, I believe, for the Blues this year and so far in his Blues career, while they brought in Elijah Hollins from the Gold Coast Suns to go back to playing that high half forward role that he was, of course, drafted into. Again, when he was at Gold Coast, he wanted to be a high half forward who can play some inside midfield, but unfortunately at the time he played for Gold Coast in their VFL team, they were playing him a lot off the wing and in a ton of different positions. So with the Blues giving him his first year off the half forward line and eventually getting him into the midfield a little bit more, it looks like that might be a little bit more of a narrative that they're going to paint next year of creating more rotations through that midfield. So for the Blues in 2024 being a very one-dimensional, contested, slower midfield with Patrick Cripps, Walsh, Kennedy and Stewart, and really not much of a rotation, it looks like next year now they're hopefully going to have Adam Chera back at least another 10 or so more games. Again, I think they're hoping he'll play all his footy out next year, so they'll have him coming into that midfield. Of course, Jagger Smith replacing Matt Kennedy, and both the Hollins brothers potentially playing a little bit more on the inside as well, if those rumors are true. Again, I'm not too sure if Ollie Hollins will. Again, I think he's kind of made his mark on the wing opposite Blake Acres, and he's a really good two-way runner as well, and I think will improve on that. So I would say he's more likely going to be there. But I think Elijah Hollins, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe his game gets upgraded to at least 10 to 15% more of some inside midfield, meaning that a guy like Patrick Cripps can eventually go down forward and become another marking option for the team. So I find it very interesting that Carlton have really redeveloped this midfield and changed it a lot. And you could tell that this was a very big point of emphasis for their team, because they really tried to trade up to get a top pick, and they were not only able to do it, but they arguably brought in the best midfielder and the most ready midfielder in the draft in Jagger Smith, who can not only get the ball and be a good clearance player, but he's incredibly quick. He's probably double the speed that Matthew Kennedy is. And I think he might already be a better ball user, which is pretty insane to think, because I think that Blues midfield desperately needs some ball use in there, especially some good players who can make good plays. And again, I think that Jagger Smith adds to that. You're also bringing back in Chera for another hopeful 5 to 10 games, get him off those injuries. That would be really good. And Elijah Hollins, who can just add something a little bit different to that midfield and give them something more and another rotational player. So I think, yeah, Carlton really listen to the fans. They listen to the criticism and the experts, and they've really gone out there to try and evolve this midfield that looks so one-dimensional and slow last year. And I think it's honestly going to help them quite a fair bit. I think there's a big chance that they will go from that 8th position to, hopefully for them, moving back up to contending to be in that top 4 again. But of course, if you haven't already, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for the latest AFL content and news. Don't forget to subscribe to my IRL/vlog channel and my gaming channel, and comment your thoughts and opinions down below. How do you guys think Carlton are going to go in 2025 with this new reshaped midfield? Again, I'd very much like to know. Of course, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.